Well, folks, that music just puts a big goofy grin on my face every time I hear it because it means it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. That's right. I'm your host, Jim Reed, Bluffsterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter and Threads. I've got the best freaking job in the world. Every Monday night, I get to hang out here with my poker buddies and talk about this game that we all love so much on a podcast that they let me host. Can you believe it? Like I said, I'm your host tonight. They let me hold the mic on Mondays, but I am just one of the group here, the magic makers, the leaders at Rec Poker. We call them the Wrecking Crew. And if you want to find out more about me and the rest of the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew and check out all those smiling faces, or you can just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them right here on the show tonight, starting with producing co-host Chris Jones.
I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5v5 just about everywhere to steal a line.
And I'm Rob Washam, and you can find me as Rabman50 just about everywhere.
And I'm Taylor Moss. I'm on Twitter as at Taylor_Moss, and in the Rec Poker home game, you can find me at GopherBoyTJM.
And these are three of the Wrecking Crew members I've assembled with me in the booth tonight. Many thanks, gentlemen, for sharing your insights tonight. I also have to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for being our sponsors for so many years. We depend on their support. Thank you so much, Running Aces. Most of what we do here at Rec Poker is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, and so all the help makes a big difference. If you're enjoying the show, nothing would make us happier than to like it on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give us a good rating and a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you want to find some other ways to support the show and what we do here, head on over to rec.poker/support, and you can find some ways there to help us out without ever spending a dollar. So I hope that you do, because we want to keep doing this for a long time. We're going to be looking at a post tonight. I mentioned this is the forums edition of the podcast. So every week we take a different post from our forums, those fantastic free forums over at rec.poker, and talk about it here on the air. This week we're looking at a blind versus blind hand from our very own 5x5 Chris Jones. So I'm just going to shut up and let the man talk. Chris, what made this hand interesting to you, and why are we talking about it on the show tonight?
Well, I could be exposing my tender underbelly here because I think I'm gonna not catch some flack for this hand. You could either accuse me of making a bad turn play on this hand, or you could accuse me of being kind of a bad beat story without much. But I do actually think this river spot is sort of interesting. So that's what made me bring it. I do have a question about this river spot.
All right, bring it on. And hey, you got to bring the hands that are, make you feel a little squicky inside.
Yeah.
That's how we get better, right? Thanks for bringing it tonight.
Okay, so this is blind versus blind, which I still think is probably the weakest part of my game. I find it impossible to range anyone. I never believe anyone. If you want to beat me, just get next to me and play me blind versus blind. But we're 30 big blinds effective in an ACR tournament. We are 15 away from the money, and so we're getting close to it. The small blind, who is my opponent, opens to 3.5 big blinds, and we have pocket fours, so a really trashy hand. Wish we had a different one.
Yeah, so close to pocket five.
I know,
so
much. It could have been so much better.
So
this hand would have gone so much differently. The flop, I call the flop.
Now they open to 3.5 big blinds. Now, did you have any sense of, is that their standard small blind opening size?
I think
Okay.
I've seen them do it a few times. If they're going to open, they're open to that size.
Makes sense.
So the flop with pocket fours, we do not hold the 4 of spades, but I think we had 2 red fours, is 7 of spades, 6 of spades, 3 of hearts. So we've got a gutter, we've got a pair on a board that isn't totally going to be that advent. They're going to just have a lot of overcards in this spot. It's a pretty decent flop for us, but it's not great. And so villain continues for 2.5 big blinds, which we elect to call. I could
I'm calling. No, I'm
keep
definitely
going.
calling there.
keep
Yeah.
going. Any
I-
any
I-
any raise? Anyone want to advocate for a raise here? I think we might get ourselves into some trouble, even though it's kind of an interesting candidate for it. But
We're the 30 big blind effective stack, so they have us.
yeah, they have us
covered.
covered, but not by much.
Okay.
They have I think they had like 35, 36, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we call, we go to a turn. The turn is the Queen of Hearts, which I know is like not, I mean, any Broadway card here is not our favorite. Our fours were probably good until this moment, but you know, they can have a lot of Queen X in their range. So it's not our favorite card. And they into now a pot of about what is it, about 13 and a half or so. They bet 6 big blinds, so they bet a little under half pot. And this is maybe, I think, where this hand could go a little off the rails. I do call this spot. I think you could find a fold here, maybe. But my logic here is that I think they have a lot of spades in range. They have a lot of single spades in range that are continuing here with 2 overs that don't necessarily have a queen. And so we may already just have the best hand here. And I do think in this situation they may give up on some rivers. So I think we could maybe make this call and sometimes just win with our fours. But I'm ready for the torment to begin by telling me about my turn decision here.
I'm just. I mean, I want to think about what's our calling range here, on this board. So it's Queen 7 6 3, 2-tone. Now there's 2 hearts and 2 spades. They should be betting a lot of, like, if their opening range is what we think it is for a small blind open here, they should have a lot of those unpaired overcards. They can continue with a lot of those spade draws like you're talking about. Are we telling them what we have? Are we telling them that we have like a 1 pair hand by calling both streets here and not taking an aggressive action ourselves, like with stronger hands and maybe some of these draws? I'm not sure it's an indictable offense if we are. But it does kind of, we continue to kind of condense our own holdings here, which might make us easier for them to decide whether to pull the trigger on the river or not. I guess that's the only thing that sort of comes into my mind. But you've still got the gut shot available here, and I think your fours are good. Like not never. They're good a lot of the time when they've got 2 overs. Did you have a sense of this player, like if a spade doesn't come, did you have any kind of a sense of, are they the kind of player that's going to fire a bluff on the missed draw?
I mean, they're if I look back at this hand history, they're capable, solid player, winning player on ACR at fairly high stakes. So I think they're very capable. But given that we're getting, I mean, we've talked a lot about ICM pressure, and I think it goes kind of, even though they cover me, they don't really want to chop themselves down to 5 or 6 big blinds here. So they're going to be less incentivized after I've called them twice to pull that third barrel without this board changing significantly, is my opinion.
Yeah, and when we're playing against, more sophisticated players, I always give them credit for having more bluffs than a more straightforward player will have, which makes me, on the one hand, more inclined to continue the way that you have here with the call. But then the other side of that coin is they're also more capable of bluffing the river. And I think we have to fold a lot of the time on the river. There's not a lot of good cards for us that aren't exactly a 4 or a 5 that we have to fold on the river. And So my question's really about like equity realization as much as anything else. If we feel like we're not going to be able to actually get them to show down when we are ahead, that might incline me towards folding more. But what does the panel think? Is there a size? Is there a bet size question either? If it was bigger or smaller, would that change your mind? Taylor, you unmuted there.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of the classic like polarized spot, and we have a bluff catcher. We have a bluff catcher that blocks. I guess on the flop it blocks the nuts. On the turn it doesn't block the nuts anymore, but still blocks a very relevant hand. So that's kind of good. It's a little bit worse than having like a 7 or a 6 with something else, because we lose out on like 2 pair outs. However, we do like have the like gut shot straight outs as a potential there too. So like there's some pluses and minuses for like all these things in terms of like, should we be calling? How do we feel in against certain hands? But like the fact that they've gone polar and like we've kind of got that bluff catcher spot, it really is kind of, in my opinion, just kind of like one of those like flip a coin type of situations, and potentially just like stick with it. So I don't mind the turn call. Obviously it's not something we ever feel like great about, but like also we can't just be folding everything here, especially in a blind versus blind spot.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you never believe anybody and don't give them any credit, right? That's
right. Why would you ever believe anyone?
Right.
Okay, so I think, oh,
And you'd still have 18 big blinds
oh yeah,
behind. So you're not giving away your entire stack. So
Yep.
yeah, I wouldn't fault anybody for calling here, because I mean, there's 3 cards over your 4s right now. And if he paired any one of those, of course you're dead. But he could be doing this as a capable player with any 2 over cards, whether they hit flop or not, hit the turn or not. So yeah, to Taylor's point, it's definitely a bluff catcher. He's polarized his range to either he has something or he has nothing. And as we can see from the results, what he did have was open-ended straight draw and a flush draw, right, on the turn. So a call was warranted. I mean, we were actually ahead at that point in time when we put the money in the pot. We were ahead. So I like Taylor's spot saying that it's a coin flip, because it really is. It's this coin flip. But against a capable player, yeah, I think I lean towards a call there.
All right, I didn't get beat up as much as I thought, but okay. So then I think this is the really interesting spot of the hand, and in the moment I was like, there's no way I can not. Well, I'll tell you what happens, then we can talk about it. So we're sitting there, we're kind of like, oh, this is a bluff catcher. I hope this goes check. And the river is the miracle 5. So now we've made our straight. Final board is the 5 of diamonds, so neither of the flushes come in. So the board is now queen of hearts, 7 of spades, 6 of spades, 3 of hearts, 5 of diamonds, and we have pocket 4s. That feels pretty good. We have 18 behind, there's 25 in the middle, and the villain bets 4 big blinds, so really goes into that blocker sizing. And this is where I start to, okay, so remember, we're kind of in an ICM situation. We're kind of in like a time where we're 15 away from the money. We have 18 behind. They bet 4. There's already 25 in the middle. We're very likely to be good here. But 8-9 does loom as a candidate that is out there. I don't think 8-4 is realistic. So like, I think like it's really 8-9 or we're winning. But should we be raising here? Or should we just be calling this small blocker bet with pretty much the second nut? I know it's not technically the second nuts, but it's pretty much the second nuts.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's technically the third nuts because they could have that weird gapper there. But I think I agree with you. I think it's effectively the second nuts. I mean, so the question is, can they have 8-9? Yes, they absolutely can. Can they have 8-4? Yeah, maybe, but I don't really think so. The other question that we're not asking is what's going to call us?
Yeah, that's the bigger question.
Because there is now a 4 straight on the board. We don't have that many 4s in our range because we did call a 3.5 open. But we definitely have some 4s. So do they. Because this could be a chop too, I guess. We haven't said it, but they could have a hand like 6-4 or 5-4, 4-3 that they took that same line with. I don't think it's as likely as the 8-9, but I think they could have some 4s as well. But with the
does
4
like
straight
pocket
out there,
queens? Does pocket queens?
that's
call?
because
does-
you have
does-
to get two
Do
pairs.
aces call?
Well, yeah, they definitely call
7-6
ace,
call?
queen, ace, queen, queen,
Do they?
queen.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
If we
definitely.
jam it in
Oh
there,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're not jamming that big, right? We're not jamming
Yeah,
that
when
big.
they go 4, we've got 18 back, so we're putting in an additional 14, which is going to be like a third of the pot at that point or something like
Right,
that.
it's a very small bet in relation to the pot.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it's not polarizing you very much, right? Because it's not that big a bet. But I think there's a ton of hands that he could call with. 7-8.
Mhm.
He could call you or 7-6, I mean. He
Yeah,
could call you
7.
with
There are some
7-6.
2 pairs. Yeah.
Queen 7, if you happen to have Queen 7. He could call you with that. I think there's a ton of hands that he can call you with.
Yeah, I like this, and it's because of all the other previous reasons that we kind of laid out. Like they were polar on the turn, right? If that's the case, like they have a lot of like somewhat strong like made hands within their range that can still find calls. The sets, the 2 pairs, the over pairs, that type of stuff. We do get a lot of parts of their polar range to fold here, but there's really just one combo that we're scared of, which is the nuts. Obviously, I honestly like this just because of like how strong they played their hand on the turn.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
we like to like go like one level deeper just to make sure everyone gets it. Like because they played their hand so strong in the turn, like we beat some of the strong polar hands that they took that with. So now we can attack some of those with our raises. So that's the reason that I like that, is because like there's hands in the upper part of their polarized range that we beat. So we can now take this action. If they take a polarized action, we've, have bottom set or something, then all of a sudden this becomes really poor because we don't beat a whole lot of their like top polarized range. So that's the reason why I'm like all right with like taking this action.
Yeah, I think we're definitely getting called by enough hands to make it worth it given the size. I think that's true. I think
And can we talk real quick about a GTO perspective?
absolutely.
If both opponents were playing GTO, the small blind would be calling 90% of the time and not raising with 8-9 suited.
Pre-flop. you mean,
GTO,
sorry,
Pre-flop,
in
you
the-
mean,
yeah,
okay.
pre-flop,
Yeah,
pre-flop.
yeah.
So if you think in those terms, now you're almost taking 8-9 out of his range, because that is not the type of hand that should be raising pre-flop. And then if you go to the next step, and this is why I said that the small blind played more aggressive than optimal and the big blind played less aggressive than optimal, because in a big blind, 30 big blinds effective, when you face a raise with pocket 4s, you go all in.
I was gonna ask
That's
Chris
the-
about that because
that's
that's
the-
the
that's the
part that I was gonna
GTO.
pick on.
So that is my standard play, but I do, as I'm getting into like bubble play, I turn those into more like sort of like the more passive, more like collie kind of plays. I do know that, I don't know. Is that the mistake?
Are we
I
near
made
the
in this
bubble
example?
here?
Yeah, we're 15 away from the money.
Oh,
And
How
this
big a
is-
field was it?
This is like the Sunday warm up. So it's a 109 and there's like a probably
oh, a huge
2000
field.
2000
Yeah,
field.
don't raise river.
Sorry.
So,
Yeah, but
Because we're
if you
too
would've-
close. Because
if
we're so
you-
close. Is that why?
yeah,
We're so
we don't
close
want
to
to
the
bust
bubble?
here. We do
Yeah.
not want to bust here.
But if you raise pre-flop, you're gonna get a ton of folds.
Mhm.
I mean, if you go all
So-
in pre-flop,
so-
you're gonna
So
get a
we
ton
should
of
jam.
folds.
We should jam this even with the kind of the bubble factor. We should jam this here, and then we should just call the blocker bet here because of the if we get to this point, if we get to the river here,
I think so.
Um,
It plays poorly post flop, right? Like
Right.
you're stuck in these
Right.
spots exactly where you are, where it's like, hey, I don't know where I'm at.
right?
So yeah,
Yes, that's
that
why
does change
I
some
believe,
dynamics.
yeah, I believe that's why GTO tends to just jam it
Mhm.
pre-flop because it plays so poorly post flop.
Mhm.
And you're up against a small blind range that is wide open. It is hugely open. I mean, they're opening like tons and tons of hands. I think what 40% of them or something like that. Let's see, they're opening
Mhm.
they're raising 30% of the hands. So that means a pocket fours is an automatic jam in this spot.
Hmm.
Now, depending on how you feel about the bubble at this point in time, is it important for you to get there? Because 30 big blinds, you could probably coast into the money in this big of a field with 15 left. We were talking about that in our last one, right? Where in a big field, there's going to be a ton of people with less chips than you.
Yeah.
So
for
it's
sure.
very going to be very easy just to fold into the money. If that's the case, you should have just folded pre-flop.
Yeah, I mean that's I think another potential criticism of this hand, right? Like,
Yep.
I mean, this is a hand where I walked away from it and be like, how did I just bust this right
Mhm.
here? That seems like this was a disaster. Like that to exit, because yeah, 30 big blinds is actually it's very healthy in this tournament at this
Oh, sure.
stage. I'm probably in the top half of players. I'm probably even in that like maybe top kind of 25-30% of the field. And so then I just end up busting in this hand. And they did have 8-9. If we didn't mention that, they did have 8-9.
Yes.
So yeah.
In our last hand, we talked about the guy with ace queen jamming all in as one of the big stacks and losing against ace king in the same bubble spot.
Mhm, mhm.
So this is basic. Well, you ended up playing the hand out to the river, obviously,
Mhm.
with bets on each street, but ultimately it was the same thing, right?
Well, but I do
There's-
think but I mean, like we do have essentially the second nuts here. Like there's 4 combos of 8-9 out there if he's playing the suited combos. It's like it's I don't know. I guess it's not really fair to call it a cooler, but it's closer to like shoving with kings and them having aces than it is to shoving with ace queen. Because you really are like it's the second nuts almost,
Well, what I was getting at is a pre-flop play. It
Oh,
was
I'm
all
sorry. Yes,
it
yes,
was all
yes,
pre-flop.
yes. Yeah.
Do we play this hand? Do we jam this hand, or do we fold?
Mhm.
And we talked earlier about ICM spots where raises become calls, calls become folds. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a argument to be made in a bubble situation like this with even with pocket fours, even against a aggressive small blind player, as long as he's got us covered. I think in this case, we could probably call the flop, but I think we fold the turn
Mhm.
because calls become folds. And so that call on the turn probably becomes a fold. We still have 18 big blinds and we easily make the money with that.
And then similarly, if we feel like we are that close to the bubble, then I guess the raise on the river becomes a call by the same demotion of action that we feel when we're in high ICM situations. Well, Chris, I think everyone agrees you played the flop really well. There's no debate amongst the group. I thought we all think that you absolutely killed the flop.
Thank you.
Played it
Thank
perfectly.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
That smooth call on the flop was
Hang the banner.
errorless. Hang the banner. But yeah, and it just goes to show like how close how impactful the bubble is to this, the ICM pressure is to it, because
Yeah, but
if you are in a
remember,
situation, yeah,
the small blind played the pre-flop horribly.
right.
Yeah, but so did Chris. So I guess it doesn't matter.
All right. Well, this is an interesting hand. If folks listened last week, like Rob was mentioning, we had kind of a similar situation, getting close to the money in a large field tournament, and how that might affect how we play certain hands leading up to that point. Yeah, I think it's an interesting spot. I'm glad that you brought this one, Chris, because there's interesting action on every street but the flop. And I think we teased
Which
us
I
into
played exceptionally
perfectly,
well.
flawlessly.
Yeah.
Flawless flop
Yeah.
play.
Yes.
And I think, if it makes any difference, you probably go broke with pocket fives here too. So I wouldn't feel too bad about something would have been different if the fives, if you had pocket fives, something would have come out differently, and it wouldn't have run out that way, I'm sure. Fives don't do you like that.
No, they don't.
Well, if he had pocket fives, he still loses, right?
I think so.
But does he play it any different? Does he play
Right.
pocket fives differently than he plays the
Oh, just because of
fours?
his like inherent connection to the hand.
That's what
Maybe
I'm getting at.
Might have
5 by
found
5.
might have
You
found
never
that
know.
shove.
It might have been a little
found that
different.
shove.
He might
Yeah.
have actually jammed the fives like he should have the fours.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I mean, they
Probably
are
true.
a significantly
True.
stronger
Well,
hand.
it is a much
Oh,
better
yeah.
hand. So
All right, guys. Well, any other excoriating comments that we can pile on to Chris for his non-flop related play? Doesn't look like it. All right. Well, Chris, thanks again for bringing this hand in. You're a great sport, and I think give yourself a bit of a break. We're giving you a hard time because we're buddies here, but I don't think anyone thinks that you like butchered the hand. Well, Taylor probably thinks you did, but
I
other
don't
than
think
that,
I think any one of us would have done the same thing
Yeah.
in the similar circumstances. So I don't think anybody's being superior here because we've lost with even worse plays many times.
Yeah. Thanks to Chris and Taylor and Rob for joining me in the booth tonight. I love talking poker with you guys. This is the highlight of my whole week. Thanks to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for your support. And thanks for you, the listeners. We wouldn't do it if it wasn't for you. So keep it up. And thanks for all your support. And we'll see you next week on the Rec Poker Podcast.